What is going on, family, my fellow renegades? I hope everybody is doing well. We are back and we are here for chapter 3. And again, I promised that we would not take as long to get to chapter 3 this time. And it was a little bit even longer than I had even wanted to go. But we are way faster than it was between 1 and 2. So we're going to definitely keep this train running. I don't know if I'm going to cry in this one or not, because the last one I didn't think I was going to. And it got me anyway. So you never damn know when it comes to Ren. So let's go ahead and jump into chapter 3. Let's do it.
My therapist was scowling at my weekly anxiety and depression scores like a detective trying to crack a particularly stubborn case. There were no signs of improvement, and the scores followed no real measurable pattern that were consistent with bipolar. After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all. And it was a very odd thing to be stripped of an identity in an instant. The reality was that a 20-minute in and out consultation 2 years ago led to 2 years of swallowing pills that I never needed and devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had. The emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation.
Before we get too far into this, I gotta address the fact that he be kind of almost looking way too hard to be talking about such serious things. Look at the drip, man. Look at the drip. Like he just get ready to go film another music video. You know what I mean? Like he'd be looking way too fresh to death right now for this such serious conversation about mental illness and him trying to find what's wrong with him. You know what I mean? He looks way too damn cool. You shouldn't look so cool when you're so sad. Okay. All right, we were crying on the last one. We're laughing in this one. Let's get it together, Johnny. Get it together.
Emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation. But I was also hopeful that this new path could offer me the relief that I desperately needed. He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but instinctively true to character, I started researching it online as soon as I got home. Apparently, ME is the medical equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book, with tiredness as the only consistent plotline. There were no universally accepted reasons as to why the fuck it existed in the first place. It seemed it was largely accepted to be a post-viral condition, but that was all speculative, because there were no clear consensus in the medical community what ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness that wouldn't go away with rest. I could relate to this. In fact, I could more than relate to it. For anyone lucky enough to not have experienced this, if you want an idea of what it's like, force yourself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row. During this time, eat the food that makes you feel terrible, and in this sleep-deprived state, exercise until your muscles give out. By the 3rd day, you'll have a small insight into living with this condition. During the years post-stem cell transplant, where I recovered a lot of my health and functionality, I remember getting COVID and thinking it was a walk in the park compared to the first year of my illness. The difference was COVID lasted about a week. The thick of my illness lasted 8 years, and it only was getting worse. I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic. It was a 6-month waiting list, God bless NHS wait times, but I felt excited to be surrounded by people who would understand me, where I could climb out of this nightmare. But my hopes were pretty quickly crushed during that first visit. I remember walking into a space that looked like a disused classroom where a bunch of people on chairs were sitting around in circles like Alcoholics Anonymous. I could feel a sense of camaraderie and that we all felt like dog shit. We were all confused and we were all desperately wanting to feel better. I believe at the time I was probably the youngest in the group. The group leader waddled in and handed us all a booklet that looked like a school timetable. She then sat us down and told about this new revolutionary technique called pacing, where you write down and track everything that you do in a day, and then you do it less. And then with time, do it more again. The theory being that you have a limited bucket of energy compared to normal people, and you need to protect that and gradually push it. I thought this sounded pretty stupid, so I raised my hand. I told her about the pain in my body. I told her that my muscles twitched constantly. I told her that my bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that. She just pointed at the booklet and told me to follow it. I asked her about things like heavy metal poisoning, about chronically reactivating viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated, so much so that my legs buckled as I was walking home. I began to sob uncontrollably on the side of the road. An old woman knelt down to comfort me and asked me what was wrong. I didn't even really know how to explain, so I just told her that I missed my friend. Despite my skepticism, I stuck to the program for at least half a year, and I kept going for my periodic visits to the clinic, and it did jack shit. In fact, I got worse. I was always getting worse. One thing that particularly struck me about the ME support groups was the pure desperation and confusion. With most other conditions, you're given a diagnosis, a prognosis of whether it's going to kill you, and what you can do to manage it or cure it. With ME, you don't get that. You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out. There was no selection bias to the people suffering. Members of the group were anything from esteemed ex-lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say, these people were for the most part all extremely driven and collectively mourning their old lives. There's a stigma that because ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy. I can tell you firsthand that me and every single person I've met with genuine ME would rather run 1,000 marathons than have to live another week with the tiredness and the unrelenting fatigue. We were at war with our tiredness, trying desperately to escape it, and some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me, really intensely, as though he was studying every lyric coming out of my mouth. He approached me and asked me if the songs I was singing were mine. I said they were. A big smile was painted across his face, and he told me he just finished recording Plan B's latest record, which turned out to be The Defamation of Strickland Banks, one of my favourite albums of all time. He was looking for a new project to sink his teeth into, and he asked me if I'd come to London to record. We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes, so bit by bit, when I could, I'd get the train to London and start chipping away at my first ever album. I didn't really let on how I was feeling during this time because I didn't want to sabotage it. There would be times I'd finish up in the vocal booth after doing the take, excuse myself to go to the toilet, throw up from the dizziness I was experiencing, sometimes with specks of blood, and then I'd go back and pretend that nothing had happened. I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was fine. There was only so long that I was able to keep this up. Eric told me it'd be a cool idea for me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through. The usual way it would go is I'd be in the back of Charlie's car, the whole world would be spinning, I'd be trying my best to sleep in it all day, parked up outside of whatever venue or pub it was in London, trying to conserve energy for the show. Sometimes I'd cry a little before I performed. My whole body would be burning. Then I'd brush it off and I'd get on stage and I'd perform as best I could. People would come up to me at the end, pat me on the back. I'd smile and pretend to be charismatic. Then I'd get back in the car and I wish I was in bed and have to endure a 3-hour drive back to Bath from London. There was only a few shows where I could keep pretending. I'd usually be trying to disguise the fact that my body was trembling through the fatigue and pain. Eventually I started crying mid-set. It became blindingly obvious to everyone working with me during that time that something was very wrong. I told Eric that I needed to take some time out. My plan was to live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record. That 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months. I'd pushed myself to total burnout. The distance led to me and that angel breaking up, in part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline, I lost the record deal, and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really called to check up on me. It felt like the whole world was moving at lightning speed without me. I had this amazing opportunity right in front of me, and I was chained to the floor. I was alone, I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me, but it wouldn't. And it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn, and I would rot. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
Okay. Leading up to the next chapter. Interesting promo. I guess the thing that I took away the most from this one was a couple of things. One, how even the people who are trying to help you out and try to give you those opportunities, like even they, I think, will push you too far and beyond what you're capable of at the time. And I feel like that's kind of one of the issues with the music industry as the business side, right? It's like we put people in these positions that are good for them, but are they really ready for it yet? And again, like he even mentioned about how he wasn't ready for it yet, but he couldn't say no. He couldn't say no to the opportunity because it could be gone like that. You know what I mean? The loneliness that he probably felt, especially like he said when he was talking about like when he had to go back and he had all this opportunity in front of him, but he was basically chained to the floor, and how his friends from Trick the Fox didn't call him. I definitely can relate to the idea of being chained to the floor, and it seemed like the whole world is spinning around you, and it seems like nobody cares at all that what you're going through. You know what I mean? Like nobody's paying attention really that closely. And that's the thing is like, you know, I try to consider myself, I consider myself to be a pretty observant person, especially in person, right? I try to pay attention to people's like body language and stuff like that. And it's like, how does nobody notice that he's going through this? You know what I mean? Like most people are not that good at hiding it all. You know what I mean? How is nobody checking on him like that? You know, you're throwing a lot at a guy, and in a moment, you got to make sure that these people are right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like even when people have some of the best intentions, we still like push people too far. And I won't say it's dangerous, but it's a tricky game, right? Where sometimes too much is too much. I'm not sure if I missed like the part where he was talking about how he lost like his girlfriend, or if we haven't really talked about that part yet, or if we just kind of like, and during this time that all kind of broke away. It's kind of what it sounded like he said, but maybe he's getting into it more later. But I'm really anxious for chapter 4 now, after that comment. But let's find out whatever the song is at the end of this thing.
My thought patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter. Running water is the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't want to talk about my father, I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself, I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell, I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, and it's prison in myself. I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden? The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that that time never really existed. I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind declined it. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression, I hate you, depression. Your constant oppression, respond with aggression. They say depression brings you lessons. Constant stressing conceals blessings. You will grow in broken settings. Fuck those lessons, fuck depression. I've been living in your shadow for so long that I forgot how I can shine. How I can find a refuge in my mind. How am I meant to sit here and unwind? The planets align. I feel like I'm cursed. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to hurt. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to bleed with my demons. Been feeling this way since birth. Depression, I hate you. 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 Depression, I hate you.
At first, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this might be like the first like run song that I'm like, you know, doesn't really hit me like that when it comes like this subject. Because I was like, I don't really know how I'm kind of feeling about like this like spoken word kind of like vibe to it. But again, in true like Ren fashion, like throughout the entire thing, it draws you back into it where even like where I was like, I got over that so fast. Does that make sense? Where I was like, no, he's kind of cooking though. He always talks about it in a way where it's just like, yes. When he started talking about how it gets to the point where like the sadness like turns into like aggression, and you start getting like mad at yourself for always being sad and for always being depressed. I call it part of the cycle, right? You know, I feel like I go through seasons where it's like, how bad of a season is it? And then during that season, there's cycles, where it just seems like a revolving door. Like what kind of day is today compared to like what yesterday was like. And I always try to talk about it in this way of like, you know, as long as I'm doing better today than I was yesterday, I'm going in the right direction. And when I'm going backwards is when I start worrying. And when it's backwards day after day after day, eventually one of those days starts turning into that again, you start getting mad at yourself, and you know, because you're so tired of feeling the same way that you got to feel something different, and it turns into like this rage. And what do? We take it out on ourselves. I really love that line when he was talking about, like, you know, I've been in your shadow for so long that I forget how to shine. I feel that, man. I feel that shit for sure. And I was talking to a friend the other day where they were trying to be nice, and they were trying to say something along the lines of like, you know, I wish that you could see yourself the way that I see you. And I was like, sometimes I wish that too. Because like, you know, when you feel like you're in the shadows for so long, it doesn't ever feel like you ever really do shine. And you start to forget, like, what is it that you are bringing to anybody's world that way? Are you just nothing but the sad guy? But like, I think I said it in the last video, and I'll say it again, and I'll continue to say it. Because, you know, on days like today where I can try to practice what I preach and stuff like that. I will say it's important, again, for us to never be defined by our issues and our problems, because we're a lot more than that. And even though we might have been in those shadows for so long, we still have some sort of light that we bring. Every one of us does. And that's what makes us special and unique as people, because we all have that. There's nobody else like you, you know? You might say that's a good thing, right? That's what I'd say. It's probably a good thing there's nobody else like me, right? I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you Renegades for checking in this video out. I think that's really all I got, guys. I appreciate y'all for being here. Be kind to a stranger. Tell somebody that you love them. And if you haven't joined the Foxtrot family, there's always room for you.